You hurt Grace. 3 words. That's all it took to shatter a liar's perfect world. When 6-year-old Daniel Chen spoke for the first time in 2 years, his small voice silenced an entire ballroom of San Francisco's elite. His father, billionaire Marcus Chen, fell to his knees weeping. His nanny, Grace Williams, stood frozen in disbelief. And his father's fiancée, Vivian Sterling, went pale as the truth she'd buried came clawing back to destroy her. But how did a nonverbal autistic child become the only witness to a crime no one believed happened? Why would a wealthy fiancé frame an innocent black maid for stealing a $10,000 bracelet? And what did Daniel see that night in the darkness that made him finally break 2 years of silence to save the woman he loved? The answer lies in jealousy so deep it turned to poison. In a frame job so calculated it almost worked. And in one little boy's drawings that held the truth no adult would listen to. This is the story of how lies dressed in diamonds were exposed by a child who couldn't speak, until he had to. Before going further, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this. And please drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. We love hearing from you. Now let's go back to where this all began. The Chen mansion sits high in Pacific Heights, overlooking the San Francisco Bay. From the outside, it looks like a dream. Floor-to-ceiling windows, manicured gardens, luxury cars in the driveway. But inside, it's a museum of grief. Every room echoes with the absence of Maid Chen, Marcus's wife, who died in a car accident on the Golden Gate Bridge 2 years ago. Her death didn't just take a mother, it took Daniel's voice. At 4 years old, Daniel Chen watched paramedics cover his mother with a white sheet. He screamed once, then never spoke again. Doctors called it selective mutism, triggered by severe trauma. Specialists tried everything: play therapy, speech therapy, behavioral therapy. Nothing worked. Daniel retreated into silence, communicating only through gestures and drawings on his iPad. His father, Marcus Chen, 38-year-old founder of a multi-billion-dollar AI software company, didn't know how to reach him anymore. So he did what he knew best. He worked 16-hour days, board meetings, international deals. Anything to avoid the empty mansion that reminded him he'd failed to protect the 2 people he loved most. That's where Grace Williams came in. Grace, 34, grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, the oldest of 4 siblings. She put herself through community college while working 2 jobs, then moved to San Francisco with a dream of becoming a teacher. When that didn't work out, she became a private caregiver instead. She had a gift for reaching children that others had given up on. Patience deeper than the ocean, a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Marcus hired her 18 months ago, and something miraculous happened. Daniel responded, not with words, but with trust. Grace learned basic American Sign Language for him. She discovered he loved drawing on his iPad, and that colors meant emotions. Blue for calm, red for upset, yellow for happy. When he got overwhelmed and started rocking or hitting his head, Grace knew exactly what to do. She'd wrap him in a weighted blanket, dim the lights, and hum a Mandarin lullaby that May used to sing. White Little Dove, Returning Home. The melody would calm him every time. Grace wasn't just a caregiver. She was Daniel's translator to a world that didn't understand him, and he loved her with the fierce, uncomplicated love that only children possess. But someone else noticed that love, and she hated it. Vivian Sterling, 29, blonde, polished and beautiful in that cold, calculated way that photographs well, but feels empty in person. She met Marcus at a tech industry charity gala 8 months ago. She'd recently left her PR career to focus on wellness and philanthropy, or so she said. In reality, she'd been fired from a boutique PR firm for financial irregularities. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, but her reputation was destroyed. Marcus was vulnerable, drowning in grief, desperate for someone to tell him everything would be okay. Vivian was perfect at playing that role. Sympathetic, supportive, elegant. Within 3 months, she'd moved into the mansion. Within 6, she had a diamond ring on her finger. But there was a problem. Daniel. Daniel didn't like Vivian. When she tried to hug him, he'd go stiff and pull away. When she spoke to him in that high-pitched voice people use with children they don't actually like, he'd cover his ears. And when she scheduled his therapy sessions but never attended, when she posted Instagram photos with him for her followers but recoiled when he tried to hold her hand off camera, Daniel knew. Children always know. And Grace knew too. She saw how Vivian's smile disappeared the moment cameras were off. How she called Daniel the boy instead of using his name. How she'd sigh with irritation when he had a meltdown, as if his autism was a personal inconvenience. But Grace said nothing. She needed this job. Her mother back in Mississippi had diabetes and mounting medical bills. Grace sent half her salary home every month. She couldn't afford to lose this position because the boss's fiancé didn't like her. So she stayed quiet, did her job, and loved Daniel the best way she knew how. It was a Tuesday morning in early September when the jealousy finally cracked open. Grace was in the kitchen preparing Daniel's breakfast. Gluten-free waffles cut into the precise small squares he preferred, arranged in a grid pattern with strawberries on the side. Daniel sat at the counter, drawing on his iPad, humming softly. Vivian walked in wearing a silk robe, her hair perfectly styled, even at 7 in the morning. "Daniel, sweetheart, come eat in the dining room. The kitchen is for staff." Daniel didn't move. He looked at Grace, then patted the seat next to him. His meaning was clear. He wanted Grace to sit with him. Grace hesitated. "Mrs. Sterling, I can eat later." "Nonsense." Vivian's voice had an edge sharp enough to cut. "Daniel needs to learn proper boundaries. You're the help, Grace, not family." The words hung in the air like poison. Grace felt the sting but forced a smile. "Of course, ma'am." But Daniel shook his head firmly. He grabbed Grace's hand and pulled her toward the seat next to him. He wouldn't eat until she sat down. Vivian's jaw tightened. Something dark flashed behind her eyes. She turned and walked out without another word. But Grace saw it, the hatred, the resentment, the dangerous seed taking root. That evening, Marcus came home earlier than usual. Daniel was already asleep, and Grace was cleaning up the playroom. Marcus found her there, picking up scattered crayons and toy cars. "Grace, thank you for everything you do." She looked up, surprised. Marcus rarely spoke to her beyond logistics. "Daniel had a good day today," he continued. "Dr. Patel says he's showing improvement in his therapy sessions. That's because of you. You understand him in ways I never learned how." Grace smiled softly. "He's a special kid, Mr. Chen. He just needs patience and someone who listens differently." Marcus's eyes misted. "May would have loved you. She always said Daniel needed someone who saw the world the way he does." Before Grace could respond, Vivian appeared in the doorway. Her smile was plastic. "Marcus, darling, dinner's ready. Grace, you can go now." The dismissal was clear. Grace nodded and left, but she felt Vivian's eyes burning into her back. Later that night, after Marcus was asleep, Vivian stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. She studied her reflection. Beautiful, successful, engaged to a billionaire. She should feel triumphant. But all she felt was rage. Because earlier that evening, when Marcus was telling her about his day, he'd said, "Grace really understands Daniel better than anyone, even better than I do." Those words echoed in Vivian's mind like a curse. Grace. Always Grace. The maid was supposed to be invisible, insignificant. But somehow she'd become the emotional center of this household. Marcus trusted her. Daniel loved her. And Vivian was just the beautiful accessory no one really needed. She walked to Marcus's home office, where he kept his personal safe hidden behind a sliding panel in the wall. She'd watched him open it weeks ago when he was retrieving documents. The code was easy to remember. Avro 8118, Daniel's birthday, August 15th, 2018. Vivian entered the code. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of papers, property deeds, bank statements. And there, in a blue velvet box, was the diamond bracelet. $10,000 worth of platinum and diamonds, commissioned for May's 10th wedding anniversary. But May died 3 months before that anniversary. Marcus had kept the bracelet, unable to give it away, unable to sell it. A beautiful, expensive ghost. Vivian lifted the bracelet, watching it catch the lamplight. An idea began to form. Ugly and perfect. If Grace were gone, truly gone, everything would fall back into place. Marcus would need Vivian more. Daniel would have no choice but to accept her. The wedding would proceed, and Vivian would finally have what she deserved: security, wealth, the life she'd always been promised. All she needed was a crime, and a believable culprit. Have you ever worked for someone who treated you like you were invisible? Or been in a situation where jealousy turned someone against you for no reason? Drop a comment and let us know. Vivian spent the next 2 weeks watching, planning, waiting for the perfect opportunity. She observed Grace's routine. Every Thursday, Daniel had an intensive therapy session that ran late. Grace always stayed with him, getting home around 9 p.m., exhausted. Her little converted garage apartment behind the main house had a door that didn't lock properly. Grace had mentioned it once to Marcus, asking if maintenance could fix it, but he'd forgotten. Vivian noted everything: the Thursday schedule, the broken lock, the fact that Marcus was scheduled to fly to Tokyo for a business conference that exact week. The pieces were falling into place. On the Monday before, Vivian made a show of being extra kind to Grace. She complimented her cooking. She thanked her for taking such good care of Daniel. She even suggested they have coffee together sometime to get to know each other better. Grace, relieved that the tension had eased, smiled gratefully. She had no idea she was being studied like prey. Wednesday evening, Marcus kissed Daniel goodbye. "I'll be back in 5 days, buddy. Be good for Grace and Vivian, okay?" Daniel clung to his father longer than usual. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't articulate it. He never could. Marcus left for the airport at 5 a.m. Thursday morning. Vivian watched his car disappear down the hill, then smiled. The house was hers now. That evening, Daniel's therapy session ran until 8:30. Grace brought him home exhausted, his small body heavy with the effort of a long day. She prepared his bedtime routine: bath, pajamas, his weighted blanket, and warm milk. But Vivian intercepted at the kitchen. "Grace, you look exhausted. Let me take his milk up to him tonight. You've done so much." Grace hesitated, surprised by the kindness. "Are you sure, Mrs. Sterling?" "Of course. You've earned a rest." Grace handed over the warm cup of milk, grateful. She didn't see Vivian palm 2 crushed Ambien tablets, didn't see her stir them into the milk as she climbed the stairs. Vivian brought the cup to Daniel's room, where he was already tucked into bed, his iPad beside him, drawing his nightly pictures. "Here you go, sweetheart. Drink up." Daniel eyed her suspiciously. He didn't like taking things from Vivian, but he was thirsty, and it was his routine. He drank. Within 20 minutes, his eyes grew heavy. Within 30, he was unconscious, far deeper than normal sleep. Vivian waited until 11:45. The house was silent. Grace's apartment light had gone off at 10:30. Time to move. She retrieved the diamond bracelet from the safe, her heart pounding with adrenaline. This was it. The moment that would change everything. She crept downstairs and out the back door, crossing the dark yard to Grace's small apartment. The door opened with barely a sound. That broken lock Grace had asked to have fixed. Vivian stepped inside, using her phone's flashlight. The apartment was tiny but immaculate. A single bed neatly made, a small desk with family photos, a dresser with folded clothes. Vivian opened the second drawer and shoved the bracelet deep beneath Grace's folded scrubs and t-shirts. Perfect. She turned to leave and froze. Through the apartment window, she saw movement in the main house. A small figure in the upstairs hallway. Daniel. Her heart lurched. The Ambien should have kept him under for hours. But Daniel was heavier than she'd calculated. The dose wasn't enough. Vivian watched, breath held, as Daniel's small shadow moved past the window. He was groggy, stumbling, clearly drugged but somehow awake. Did he see her? Could he see her through the darkness? She waited 5 agonizing minutes, then slipped out of Grace's apartment and back into the main house. When she checked Daniel's room, he was back in bed, his iPad clutched to his chest, breathing deeply. Vivian exhaled. He was asleep. Whatever he'd seen, if anything, was lost in an ambient fog. She returned to her own room, set her alarm for 6 a.m., and lay in bed rehearsing tomorrow's performance. But in Daniel's room, something Vivian didn't know about was happening. Daniel's iPad, still clutched in his small hands, had autosave enabled. Every drawing he made automatically backed up to the household cloud server, a feature Marcus had set up months ago when reviewing the home's data storage. And in his drugged, confused state, Daniel had drawn what he saw: a woman with yellow hair, a shiny object in her hand. Grace's door. Nighttime. The timestamp read 12:52 a.m. Daniel didn't understand what he'd witnessed. His 6-year-old medicated brain couldn't process it, but his hands had recorded the truth anyway. If you're gripped by this story, hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed. And tell us in the comments, do you think Daniel will be able to prove what he saw? Let's continue. Friday morning arrived cold and gray over San Francisco. Grace woke at 6:30, later than usual. Something felt off. The house was too quiet. She dressed quickly and hurried to the main house. Daniel's bedroom door was open, but he wasn't there. Her heart jumped. She found him in the kitchen, sitting at the counter, looking pale and groggy, his iPad clutched tightly. "Danny, baby, are you okay?" Grace touched his forehead. No fever, but he looked wrong. Exhausted, disoriented. He leaned into her touch, seeking comfort, but didn't respond. Grace started preparing breakfast, her instincts on high alert. Something had happened. She didn't know what, but she felt it. At 7:30, Vivian descended the stairs. Her hair was artfully disheveled, her silk pajamas perfect, and her face arranged in an expression of carefully crafted panic. "Grace! Oh my God, Grace!" Grace spun around. "What's wrong?" "The bracelet! May's bracelet! It's gone!" Grace's stomach dropped. "What bracelet?" "The diamond bracelet Marcus commissioned for May." Vivian's voice climbed, theatrical and sharp. "It was in the safe, and now it's missing." Grace's mind raced. Maybe Mr. Chen moved it before he left? Or it fell behind something? "I already checked everywhere." Vivian's hands shook. A nice touch, Grace noted distantly, even through her own rising panic. "This was a family heirloom. $10,000. We have to search the entire house." Daniel began rocking at the counter, distressed by the shouting. He clutched his iPad harder, trying to show it to Grace, but she was too distracted. Okay, let's stay calm," Grace said, moving toward him. "Let me get Daniel settled, and then I'll help." "We need to search now," Vivian snapped. For the next hour, chaos consumed the mansion. Couch cushions were overturned. Drawers were emptied, closets ransacked. Grace helped search, her hands trembling, while Daniel followed her from room to room, desperately trying to get someone, anyone, to look at his iPad. But no one looked. At 8:45, Vivian gasped from Grace's apartment. Her voice carried across the yard. "Oh my God, oh my God!" Grace's blood turned to ice. She ran outside, Daniel close behind her. Vivian stood in Grace's tiny apartment, holding the diamond bracelet aloft. Her face was a perfect mask of shock and betrayal. "Grace, it was in your dresser, hidden under your clothes." The world tilted. Grace couldn't breathe. No, I've never seen that before. I didn't. Someone put it there." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Actual tears, Grace noticed with distant horror. The woman had practiced. "Grace, if you needed money, if your mother's medical bills were too much, you could have asked. Marcus would have helped. We would have helped you." The implication landed like a bomb. Financial motive, opportunity, evidence. Grace's voice cracked. "I didn't take anything. Mrs. Sterling, please, someone is setting me up." "Who?" Vivian whispered. "Who would do that?" The unspoken answer hung between them. "You." But Grace couldn't say it. It sounded insane, paranoid. Vivian pulled out her phone. "I have to call Marcus and the police." "No, please." But Vivian was already dialing, putting the phone on speaker. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice groggy from Tokyo's time zone. Vivian, what's wrong? Marcus, I'm so sorry. It's the bracelet. May's bracelet. It was stolen. Silence, then. What? I found it hidden in Grace's room. More silence. Longer this time. Then Marcus's voice hollowed out by disbelief. Put Grace on. Vivian handed the phone to Grace, whose hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. Mr. Chen, I swear to you, I didn't take anything. I would never. Grace. His voice broke. Why? I didn't. Someone planted it. Please, you have to believe me. The evidence is in your room. Because someone put it there. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. He ran to Grace, shoving his iPad toward her face, toward the phone, screaming without sound. Look, look, look! On the screen was his drawing. Yellow hair, shiny bracelet. Grace's door. Nighttime. The timestamp 12:52 a.m., September 15th. 7 hours before Vivian discovered the theft. But no one looked. Grace was crying. Marcus was demanding answers. Vivian was gently moving Daniel aside. Sweetheart, go to your room. This is adult business. Daniel's body began to shake. His breathing quickened. The signs of a meltdown building. He started hitting his own head, a self-soothing behavior that emerged when he was overwhelmed. Grace reached for him instinctively. Danny, honey, I'm okay. Don't touch him. Vivian's voice was sharp. You've done enough. On the phone, Marcus's voice was hollow. I'm calling the police. Grace, I'm so sorry. Within 30 minutes, 2 SFPD officers arrived. Grace tried to explain, tried to tell them about Vivian's jealousy, about the timing, about Daniel's strange behavior. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bracelet was in her possession. She had access to the house. She had financial motive. They'd already looked up her mother's medical debt. As they handcuffed her, Grace looked at Daniel one last time. Danny, I promise I didn't do this. You know who I am. You know I'd never hurt this family, Daniel screamed. Not words, he still couldn't form words, but a raw, primal sound of anguish that made even the officers flinch. He tried to run to her, but Vivian caught him, holding him back, his small body thrashing. Shh, baby, it's okay. She can't hurt us anymore. Grace was led to the patrol car, watching through blurred tears as Daniel pressed his hands against the window, his iPad falling to the ground, the screen cracking. The last thing she saw before they drove away was his small handprint on the glass. And in that moment, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't speak, but he could show them. He would show them. He just had to find a way. What would you do if you were in Grace's position, falsely accused with all the evidence stacked against you? Would you fight or would you give up? Let us know in the comments. The San Francisco County Jail smelled of disinfectant and despair. Grace sat in a gray interrogation room, handcuffed to a metal table, facing Detective Lisa Rodriguez and a tired-looking public defender named Tom Chen. No relation to Marcus, just cruel irony. Detective Rodriguez, mid-40s with sharp eyes that had seen every kind of lie, slid a folder across the table. Ms. Williams, the evidence is substantial. The bracelet was found in your possession. You had access to the safe's location, and your mother's medical bills give you clear financial motive. Grace's voice was hoarse from crying. I didn't take it. Vivian Sterling planted it in my room. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Why would your employer's fiancée frame you? Because she's jealous. Daniel, Mr. Chen's son, he loves me. He responds to me in ways he doesn't with her. She wants me gone. The words sounded paranoid even to Grace's own ears. A desperate employee accusing a wealthy woman of an elaborate frame job? It was the oldest defense in the book. The public defender sighed, barely looking up from his notes. Ms. Williams, I've reviewed your case. If you plead guilty, we can negotiate a lighter sentence. Maybe 2 years with good behavior instead of the 10 you're facing for grand theft. Guilty? Grace's voice cracked. For something I didn't do? The alternative is going to trial with overwhelming evidence against you. You'll lose. Grace looked at her hands, at the handcuffs cutting into her wrists, and felt something inside her break. Not her spirit, not yet, but her faith in the system, in justice, in the idea that truth mattered more than evidence. I want to call my brother. 2 hours later, Grace was released on bail, an ankle monitor clamped around her leg like a shackle. Her younger brother, Marcus Williams, the universe's second cruel joke, had drained his savings, borrowed from his church, and scraped together the $10,000. Marcus Williams, 28, was everything his sister was: kind, determined, and unwilling to accept injustice. He worked as a community organizer in the Fillmore district, San Francisco's historically black neighborhood that had been gutted by redevelopment. He knew what it looked like when the system crushed people who couldn't fight back. And he knew his sister, Grace, would never steal, which meant someone was lying. "We're going to prove it, Gracie," he said as they drove away from the jail. "I don't care how long it takes." But Grace barely heard him. She was staring out the window, thinking about Daniel. Was he eating? Was he sleeping? Did he understand why she'd disappeared? The restraining order came the next day. Grace was forbidden from coming within 500 feet of any member of the Chen household. The legal system had built a wall between her and the child she loved, and on the other side of that wall, Daniel was falling apart. At the Chen mansion, Daniel hadn't eaten in 3 days. His new routine, the one without Grace, felt wrong in every way. Vivian tried to prepare his breakfast the first morning, but she made scrambled eggs instead of waffles, cut them in random chunks instead of small squares, and served them on the wrong plate. Daniel pushed the plate away and walked out of the kitchen. "Daniel, come back here right now." Vivian's voice was sharp, her patience already worn thin. "You need to eat." But Daniel went to Grace's empty apartment and sat outside the door. He stayed there for 4 hours, waiting, his iPad in his lap, drawing the same image over and over. Yellow hair, shiny bracelet, Grace's door, nighttime. Marcus returned from Tokyo 3 days after the arrest. He looked thinner, older, the guilt eating him alive. He found Daniel camped outside Grace's apartment, surrounded by drawings. "Danny, buddy, you can't stay out here." Daniel didn't look at him, just kept drawing. Marcus picked up one of the sketches. His breath caught. The image was so specific: a figure with blonde hair, something glinting in her hand, a door, stars in the sky indicating nighttime, and in the corner, a timestamp, 12:52 a.m. "Danny, when did you draw this?" Daniel pointed to the date on his iPad. September 15th, the night before the bracelet was discovered. Marcus's heart began to pound. "You drew this before Vivian found the bracelet." Daniel nodded. Did you see something that night?" Daniel nodded again, more vigorously. He pulled up another drawing, then another, then another. All the same scene, all time-stamped before the discovery. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Why didn't anyone notice these? But he knew why. Because adults had been too busy shouting, too busy accusing, too busy to look at what a nonverbal child was desperately trying to show them. Marcus called Dr. Sarah Patel, Daniel's therapist, immediately. Dr. Patel arrived within the hour. She was a small Indian woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and 30 years of experience working with nonverbal children. She'd been out of town during the arrest, a family emergency, but she'd heard what happened. She sat with Daniel in his room, looking through his iPad's gallery, drawing after drawing, all the same scene, all time-stamped between 12:45 a.m. and 1:15 a.m. on September 15th. "Daniel," she said gently, "these drawings, they're not about Grace being arrested, are they?" He shook his head. "They're about something you saw before that, something that happened at night." He nodded. Dr. Patel looked at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, children with autism often have extremely accurate visual memories. If Daniel witnessed something, these drawings are likely precise representations of what he saw." Marcus's hands trembled. "But he can't testify. He doesn't speak." "No," Dr. Patel agreed. "But these timestamps don't lie. He drew the crime scene 7 hours before your fiancée discovered the theft. How would he know to draw it unless he witnessed it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Patel pulled out her phone and took photographs of every drawing, making sure the timestamps were visible. I'm going to reach out to someone, a community advocate I know. If Grace is innocent, we need to investigate properly. Why would you do that? Marcus asked quietly. You work for me. Dr. Patel looked at him with something close to pity. Because I work for Daniel first, and that child is suffering without Grace. In my professional opinion, removing her from his life has caused severe psychological distress. If she's innocent, and I believe she might be, then we owe it to Daniel to find out the truth. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to defend Vivian, defend his judgment, defend the decision he'd made. But he couldn't, because looking at his son, thin, silent, haunted, he knew Dr. Patel was right. Something was very wrong. Dr. Patel sent the photographs to Marcus Williams, Grace's brother. She'd found him through the community organizing network. 6 degrees of separation in a city like San Francisco. When Marcus Williams saw the timestamps on Daniel's drawings, he knew he had something real, something that could break the case open. He started investigating. First stop, the Chen's neighbor, Helen Zhao, an elderly Chinese woman who lived in the house directly adjacent to the Chen estate. Mrs. Zhao, I'm Marcus Williams. I'm trying to help prove my sister's innocence in a theft case. Did you notice anything unusual on the night of September 14th, going into the 15th? Helen thought for a moment. Actually, yes. I heard the side gate open around midnight. Very unusual. The motion sensor light came on briefly. Marcus's pulse quickened. Did you see who it was? No, but I heard footsteps, heels clicking on the stone path. Grace, your sister, she always wore sneakers. I remember because they were so quiet. Vivian wore heels. Always. Next, Marcus called in a favor from Ramon Garcia, an IT contractor who did work for the Chen estate. They'd met at a community tech workshop Marcus had organized. Ramon, I need to ask you something. And I know it could cost you your job, but an innocent woman is facing 10 years in prison. Ramon listened to the story. Then he sighed. The hedge trimming crew came through the week before the theft. They adjusted the security camera angle near the back garage. I meant to realign it but got busy. It might have caught something it normally wouldn't. Can you get me that footage? Ramon hesitated. Man, if I get caught... I know, but please. That night, Ramon met Marcus at a coffee shop in the Mission District with a USB drive. This is from the night of September 14th into the 15th. The timestamp is there. I didn't watch it. I don't want to know. But it's yours. Marcus watched the footage in his car. The angle was wrong, cutting off most of the garage. But there, at 12:17 a.m., a figure in light-colored clothing appeared at the edge of the frame, entering what looked like Grace's apartment door. At 12:23 a.m., the same figure exited, something small and bright visible in their hand. The footage was grainy. The face wasn't visible, but the timestamp matched Daniel's drawings exactly. Marcus clenched his fists. They had evidence. Real evidence. But they needed more. They needed Vivian to reveal herself. Grace couldn't take it anymore. 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks of nightmares about Daniel suffering without her. 3 weeks of watching her ankle monitor blink, marking her as a criminal. She made a decision. A dangerous one. Daniel had weekly sessions at Golden Gate Park with Dr. Patel. Outdoor therapy in natural settings helped with his sensory processing. If Grace could just see him, just check that he was okay, maybe she could survive the trial. On a Wednesday afternoon, Grace took a bus to the park, her ankle monitor hidden under jeans. Dr. Patel had texted her the location, a quiet meadow near the Conservatory of Flowers, after Grace had begged her through Marcus. Grace waited behind a massive oak tree, her heart hammering against her ribs. If she was caught, she'd go straight to jail. No bail this time. Then she saw him. Daniel, smaller than she remembered, thinner, walking beside Dr. Patel with his iPad clutched to his chest. His eyes were distant, his movements mechanical. He looked like a ghost of the child she'd known. Grace stepped out from behind the tree. Danny! His head snapped up. For one frozen second, he stared at her, as if she might be a dream. Then he bolted. He ran straight into her arms, nearly knocking her over, his small body shaking with sobs. Silent sobs because he still couldn't make sound, but his whole body convulsed with the force of his relief. Grace held him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Daniel pulled back and shoved his iPad into her hands, frantically tapping his drawing. Yellow hair, bracelet, door, nighttime. He pointed at it desperately, then at himself, then at her, trying to make her understand. Grace looked at the drawing, really looked at it this time, and her breath caught. "Danny, did you see Vivian? Did you see her put the bracelet in my room?" Daniel nodded so hard his whole body moved. Grace's hands shook. "You saw everything." He nodded again, tears streaming down his face. He opened his mouth, straining, his face turning red with effort. A sound emerged, broken, strangled. "Vav!" "Daniel!" The voice cut through the moment like a blade. Vivian stood at the edge of the meadow, phone in hand, fury blazing in her eyes. "Get away from him!" Vivian screamed. "I'm calling the police! You're violating the restraining order!" Grace's heart stopped. Daniel clung to her, shaking his head desperately, trying to speak, trying to scream the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Dr. Patel stepped between them. "Mrs. Sterling, Daniel clearly wants... She's manipulating a traumatized child." Vivian's voice was shrill. "This is exactly why she was arrested." Daniel began to panic, his breathing rapid, his body starting to rock. Grace tried to calm him, but Vivian was already on the phone, voice trembling with theatrical fear. "Yes, officer, she's here. The woman with the restraining order. She's touching my stepson. Please hurry." Dr. Patel quickly photographed Daniel's iPad screen, the drawing with the timestamp clearly visible, before Vivian could interfere. Sirens wailed in the distance. Grace had maybe 2 minutes. She knelt in front of Daniel, holding his face gently. "Danny, listen to me. I know you saw what happened. I know you're trying to tell people. Keep trying, baby. Someone will listen. Your daddy will listen." Daniel grabbed her hands, squeezing tight, his mouth opening again. "V-v-v." The police arrived. 2 officers approached, one with his hand on his belt. "Ma'am, step away from the child." Grace stood slowly, hands raised. "I just wanted to see if he was okay." "You're under arrest for violation of a restraining order." As they handcuffed her for the second time, Daniel exploded into a full meltdown. He screamed, that wordless, agonizing sound, and threw himself toward Grace, fighting against Dr. Patel's gentle hold. For the first time, he fought against Vivian when she tried to restrain him, scratching, kicking, desperate to reach Grace. "See?" Vivian gasped, playing victim perfectly. "She's upset him. This is what she does." But Dr. Patel saw something different. She saw a child fighting to protect someone he loved, fighting to tell a truth no one would hear. As Grace was led away, Dr. Patel pulled out her phone and called Marcus Chen directly. "Mr. Chen, we need to talk. I have evidence. Real evidence. And I think you need to see it before your fiancée destroys your son completely. This story is about to reach its explosive conclusion. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how this ends. And drop a comment. Do you think Marcus will finally see the truth?" Let's continue. Marcus Chen sat in his home office, staring at the evidence Dr. Patel had sent him. Daniel's time-stamped drawings, the security camera footage Ramon had risked his job to provide, Dr. Patel's professional assessment that Daniel's behavioral deterioration was directly linked to Grace's removal. And then there was the research Marcus Williams had compiled, Vivian's history of financial irregularities, her embezzlement firing, her mounting credit card debt, her Google searches on his laptop for California inheritance laws and step-parent rights to trust funds. Marcus felt sick. He'd been so blind, so desperate for someone to fix his broken family, that he'd let a predator into his home. His phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "Don't forget about the charity gala tomorrow night. Very important for your company's image. I've invited the press. The gala." Vivian had been planning it for weeks, a massive event at the mansion showcasing Chen Technologies' new AI education initiative. 200 guests, tech journalists, city officials, all there to watch Vivian play the perfect philanthropist fiancée. Marcus stared at the text. Then he made a decision. If Vivian wanted a public stage, he'd give her one. He called Marcus Williams. I have a plan, but it's risky. Grace could go to prison if it fails. She's going to prison anyway if we don't try, Marcus Williams replied. What do you need? Saturday night arrived cold and clear over San Francisco. The Chen mansion glowed with golden light, transformed into a palace of elegance. Valets parked Teslas and Mercedes. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits flowed through the entrance. A string quartet played in the garden. Champagne flowed like water. Vivian Sterling stood at the center of it all, radiant in a gold gown that probably cost more than Grace's yearly salary. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, playing hostess, accepting compliments, her engagement ring catching every light. This was her moment, her debut as Marcus Chen's future wife. After tonight, her position would be unassailable. What she didn't know was that 3 people were about to destroy everything she'd built. In the catering van parked behind the mansion, Grace Williams pulled on a server's uniform, her hands shaking. Her brother had gotten it from a sympathetic former co-worker. The ankle monitor was still on her leg, hidden under black slacks. If she was caught, she'd be arrested immediately. You sure about this, Gracie? Marcus Williams asked. Grace looked at the mansion, the place where she'd loved and cared for Daniel, where she'd been happy before Vivian poisoned everything. That little boy needs me, I'm sure. Inside the mansion's AV control room, Ramon Garcia nervously plugged a USB drive into the main display system. His hands were sweating. If this went wrong, he'd never work in tech again. But he thought about Grace, kind Grace who'd helped his sister with her English homework, and he steadied himself. On the grand staircase, Daniel sat alone, dressed in a small suit Vivian had forced him into. He looked like a doll on display. He clutched his iPad, drawing the same image he'd been drawing for weeks. Yellow hair, bracelet, door, nighttime. Around him, adults laughed and drank and talked about money. No one looked at the small boy. No one ever looked, until Grace stepped through the kitchen door. Daniel saw her first. His head snapped up, his eyes widening. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe she was real. Then he ran. He dropped his iPad and launched himself down the stairs, pushing past adults, desperate to reach her. Grace caught him, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, squeezing so tight she couldn't breathe. I'm here, baby. I'm here. The conversations near them faltered. Heads turned. Phones came out. The room began to notice. Daniel grabbed Grace's hand and pulled her toward the center of the ballroom. He had to show them, had to make them see. That's when Vivian noticed. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Security! Her voice cut through the music. That woman is trespassing. 2 security guards started forward, but Marcus Chen stepped into their path. Stop! His voice was quiet, but it carried. The room went silent. Vivian's eyes darted between Marcus and Grace, panic flickering behind her perfect mask. Marcus, she violated the restraining order. She's unstable. She needs to be removed. Then why is my son holding her hand? The question hung in the air. Daniel stood between them, one hand in Grace's, looking at his father with desperate hope. Marcus knelt slowly. Danny, do you want Grace here? Daniel nodded vigorously. Do you have something you've been trying to show me? Daniel's whole body shook as he nodded again. He picked up his iPad from where he'd dropped it, his hands trembling so badly he almost couldn't swipe the screen. He pulled up the drawing and held it toward his father. Marcus took the tablet. His throat tightened as he studied the image. Blonde figure, shiny object, doorway, stars indicating night. Then he saw the timestamp. September 15th, 12:52 a.m. You drew this the night before Vivian found the bracelet. Daniel nodded. The room was utterly silent. Every eye was on them. Every phone was recording. Marcus stood slowly, looking at Vivian. really looking at her for the first time in months. Daniel drew the crime scene 7 hours before you discovered the theft. How was that possible? Vivian's laugh was brittle. He's a traumatized child. The timestamps must be wrong. The cloud server doesn't lie. Marcus's voice was cold. Ramon, please. Ramon hit a button in the AV booth. The massive screen behind the string quartet flickered to life. Security footage played. Grainy, dark, but clear enough. A figure in light clothing approaching a door at 12:17 a.m. The same figure exiting at 12:23 a.m., something bright in their hand. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Vivian went pale. That's not, you can't see the face. But we can see the timestamp, Marcus said. 12:17 a.m., the exact time Daniel drew in his picture. And we can see blonde hair. He turned to the crowd. My son has been trying to tell us what he witnessed for 3 weeks, but he's nonverbal, so he drew it. Over and over, time-stamped proof that he saw someone plant evidence in Grace's room, someone with blonde hair, someone who had access to the safe. Vivian's chest heaved. Marcus, listen to me. You're being manipulated. By who? A 6-year-old autistic child who can't speak? Detective Lisa Rodriguez stepped forward from the crowd. Dr. Patel had called her, and she'd come to witness. Miss Sterling, I think we need to have a conversation. Vivian's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, finding none. Every exit was blocked by guests recording on their phones. Every eye was on her. Her mask finally cracked. Fine! The word exploded from her. Fine, you want the truth? She was ruining everything. Vivian pointed at Grace, her face contorted with rage. She was taking you away from me. Daniel only wanted her. You only trusted her. I was invisible in my own home. It's not your home, Marcus said quietly. We're not married. We were going to be. I was going to be part of this family. But that woman, venom dripped from every word. She kept you connected to May. She kept Daniel from accepting me. I couldn't compete with a dead woman and her saint replacement. The room was frozen. So yes, Vivian's voice dropped to something dark and ugly. I planted the bracelet. I crushed sleeping pills into Daniel's milk so he wouldn't wake up. I framed an innocent woman because she was in my way. And you know what? I would have gotten away with it if your broken son could actually speak. Daniel stepped forward. His whole body was shaking. His face was red. Every muscle was tense with effort. And then, in a small, clear voice that shattered the silence like glass, you hurt Grace. The room exploded. Gasps, cameras flashing, people talking over each other. But all Marcus could see was his son. His son who hadn't spoken in 2 years. His son who had finally found his voice. Not in therapy, not with time, but with the desperate need to protect someone he loved. Marcus fell to his knees, pulling Daniel into his arms. You spoke. Oh God, Danny, you spoke. Daniel's voice grew stronger, the words tumbling out after 2 years of silence. She hurt Grace. She lied to you. I saw her. I saw everything. Marcus was sobbing. Grace was sobbing. Half the room was crying. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward with handcuffs. Vivian Sterling, you're under arrest for evidence tampering, grand theft, filing a false police report, child endangerment, and perjury. No! Vivian screamed as the cuffs clicked onto her wrists. Marcus, I did it for us. For our family. She was taking everything from me. But no one was listening. She was being dragged away, her gold gown trailing, her mask completely shattered, screaming about injustice as she was loaded into a police car. The woman who tried to destroy an innocent person to secure her position had just lost everything on a public stage. Daniel turned to Grace, his voice small but clear. You came back. Grace knelt in front of him, tears streaming down her face. I promised I'd never leave you, didn't I? I love you, Grace. I love you too, sweetheart. Marcus looked at Grace, his face devastated. I don't know how to apologize for what I've done to you. Grace's voice was soft but firm. You start by believing your son. Always. Golden afternoon light filtered through the windows of the Chen mansion. In the kitchen, Grace, Marcus, and Daniel worked together making dinner. Flour dusted the counters. Laughter filled the air. Daniel narrated his day in careful, growing sentences. Grace had returned, not as staff, but as family. She had her own suite in the main house, a fair salary as Daniel's special education advocate, and benefits that finally allowed her mother to get proper medical care. Marcus had stepped back from work, learning to be present. He coached Daniel's adaptive soccer team. He ate family dinners. He learned sign language alongside his son. And Daniel, Danny, as they called him now, was thriving. He spoke in short sentences, still used his iPad for complex emotions, but his voice grew stronger every day. On the refrigerator hung Daniel's newest drawing, three figures holding hands under a bright sun, the words "My Real Family" written in careful letters underneath. As they sat down to eat, Daniel asked, "Grace, was it scary when nobody believed you?" Grace thought for a moment. "The scariest part was thinking I'd never see you again. But you came back, even when the police said no, because truth is worth fighting for, and you were worth the risk." Daniel considered this. "I was scared to talk for so long." "I know, baby, but I had to. For you." Grace kissed his forehead. "You found your voice at exactly the right moment. That's called courage." Daniel smiled. "Will you always be here?" "As long as you need me." "Forever, then." Marcus watched them, his heart full in a way it hadn't been since May died. The house that had been a museum of grief was finally a home again. A family rebuilt not on blood or law, but on loyalty, courage, and the unshakable belief that truth, no matter how small the voice, will always speak louder than lies. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more incredible true stories. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had to fight for the truth when no one believed you? What would you have done in Grace's situation? We read every single comment and love hearing from you. Remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. And sometimes, love is the only thing strong enough to break through years of silence. Thank you for watching. Until next time.